Welcome to the Carolina Weather Group, a weekly podcast dedicated to weather, science, technology, and more. I'm James Brierton in Charlotte, North Carolina. We have assembled a very smart, intelligent, and insightful panel tonight to help us understand images like this that we've seen this week on the news, and I'm sure you've seen it now. Kerr, Texas, surrounding areas, experiencing historic, devastating, and life-altering flash flood event on the early morning hours of Friday, July 4th. On this Wednesday night, as we stream live on the Carolina Weather Group Facebook and YouTube, over 100 people have been confirmed dead, with reportedly over 150 remaining missing. We've unfortunately seen those numbers go up over the course of the last few days. And closer to home, an event not nearly to the magnitude of what they've seen in Texas, but not too dissimilar in terms of atmospheric science. Tropical Storm Chantal, bringing historic levels of flooding here at home in the Carolinas. Tonight, our panel will answer your questions and help you, and frankly, help myself, understand how events like this unfold and help us understand what the future may hold for all of us as we continue to see flash flooding events brought on by tropical moisture, by climate change. Just 9 months since Helene impacted so many of us here in the Carolinas. If you're watching live with us on Facebook and YouTube, I do invite you to join our conversation by leaving a comment on our Carolina Weather Group panel tonight. We have Jared Smith in Charleston, South Carolina. We have Scotty Powell in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Frank Strait is in Columbia, South Carolina. And joining us, 3 guests tonight. Jordan McLeod is a former panelist here on the Carolina Weather Group, formerly of the Southeast Regional Climate Center, now at the University of Alabama, and he's going to show us some statistics that will help us understand the impact of these two events. Dr. Christine Dahl is with Climate Central and is going to help us unpack the role that climate has played in events, not only in the past 7 days, but in the past 9 months and beyond. And Troy Kimmel, he's a meteorologist in Austin, Texas, really, really close to what has happened in Texas this week. And yes, you probably do know him from WeatherBrains. And Troy, let me start with you. You guys had a very heartfelt, a very powerful conversation on your WeatherBrains show this week. And we have so many topics we want to talk to you about. But I thought your host over there, James Spann, did a wonderful job by first asking you to introduce yourself to potential new audiences that are joining us for this magnitude conversation tonight. So Troy, tell us a little bit about your background. And then of course we want to hear and help understand what's happening there in your backyard.
By the way, James, thank you to the Carolina Weather Group. And I appreciate the invitation tonight. It's a pleasure to be with y'all and be able to talk for a little bit. By the way, you got the least brainy of all the WeatherBrain group of persons. So you may be sorry at some point.
I highly doubt that.
Well,
they don't let just anybody onto that show.
Yeah. But we all say hello, and I've talked to our group tonight. They want me to express a hello from WeatherBrains to this group as well. James, I've been in Austin since pretty much after I graduated from Texas A&M University in the early and mid 80s. Came here in 1984. A lot of TV, served many of the TV stations in Austin at one time or another up until about 2012. Done radio in this area as well. That was a big part of my life. And then a strange thing happened in 88. And you can ask Scotty about this or people that have been in TV. I was approached by the faculty here at the University of Texas, which are not always known to be fans of the people at Texas A&M University. They've reached out to me in our non-major program in geography and what is now called geography and the environment at UT, and asked if I would teach classes. And it took about 2 or 3 weeks to make sure they had. I'd want to make sure they reached the right person because I was sure they had. But that ended up in a 1-semester commitment. But it ended up in a 36-year teaching career. Retired this last December from teaching. And one thing that I did in the wake of 9/11 is got more and more involved. Is a lot of our broadcast colleagues have in some cases, and even people in the private sector, and especially with our graduates now, getting more into the emergency management side of the house. And And I think that meteorologists play such an important part in this, and I always have. And I was brought on board by Campus Safety and Security at the University of Texas. Work every ball game in the Emergency Operations Center. Worked alongside of our first responders, the FBI, in those ball games, because when you get 100,000 people together, guess what? It becomes an issue. And I really enjoy the camaraderie of working in emergency management and having the ability to contribute, frankly, to the well-being of people and to be able to help. What's happened in the recent, I'm here in Austin. I track position in emergency management at the university, a part-time per teacher retirement rules, and also work for Q2 Soccer. Work in their Emergency Operations Center for Austin FC. I work for the Kyle, Texas Office of Emergency Management, which is in the Kyle Police Department. Stuff in Travis County, Texas, and also work, and this is one this week I'm really proud to be associated with, a group which is called TEXAR, TEXSAR, Texas Search and Rescue. And it is those people who are now assisting in Kerrville and even up here in Austin the last few days in trying to be able to rescue people originally. And now we're in recovery operation, and I'm briefing them as they're out every day as well. So it really has been interesting. I will tell you that in the last 5 days, and I said this on WeatherBrains a couple of nights ago, I don't think I've ever experienced such a difficult forecast. This weather system we had in Texas, and we'll talk more about it in a few minutes, but it was an incredibly different type of situation. It was not the short-range high-resolution model guidance at times was horrible, and it didn't help us. And it got where sometimes in this event in the last week or so that I use radar to forecast, and radar is not a forecast tool. But it got where you sort of began to rely on that to some degree, and it was so difficult. And then we just had these tremendous amounts of rainfall that occurred. And in the last week, I'll tell you, I don't mind admitting I've gone through shock. I've gone through anger. I've gone through sadness. I hope I'm getting closer to the part where I want answers on all of our behalves, the Weather Enterprise's behalf, about why we have actually ended up seeing this. Let me make one other statement real quick, and I'll be glad to get into more of this discussion with you. One thing that I will tell you right off the bat, and I want to make it very clear, and I've made it clear with everyone I've interviewed with this week, networks and talk shows and everywhere else, the people that hit the buttons on the AWIPs at the National Weather Service at Austin, San Antonio, those are all friends of mine. And I know every one of those people, those men and women, and I would trust them with my life. And I will tell you that there is no evidence in my mind at all that the National Weather Service, after being in some ways thrown underneath the bus originally on Friday, they did their job, and they did it in an office which is short-staffed, but they did it with surge staffing. We had 5 people in our Weather Service office, and for people who say that the watches and warnings weren't out, you're simply incorrect. The watches and warnings were out. We know it. There are even circumstances people don't know about the warnings. They all went out with WEA on them, all of them, because the National Weather Service in Austin, San Antonio has a policy that they don't issue base flash flood warnings, and they haven't for 10 years. They only issue them with considerable and with catastrophic tags and with emergency tags. That's an office policy because we are in flash flood alley down here. So I'll tell you that the office is devastated by what they see around them. And I think also they have to be devastated by the fact that originally people said in some cases there were no watches and warnings. They were out there. And I think as a group, we have to, as a weather enterprise in this country, I think we really seriously have to look and demand answers, but maybe not tonight and maybe not the next couple of days, because I'm going to tell you our whole thing now down here is to try to reunite families and knowing that this is not a recovery process. This is just, I mean, it's not it's not, we're not going to find anyone at this point that it's going to end up in a good story. This is all recovery at this point. So we're just trying to make families complete. And that is so difficult. And I will tell you before I throw it back to y'all that my Texar group, and I've talked to other people that have been down in Kerrville and also here in Austin, where we had 7 fatalities 15 miles that way. These people are seeing things that none of us should ever have to see in our lives. And so I want some answers along the way, but right now let's just get the recovery underway and get that done. And then we can all talk about it and have a discussion about what we can do better in the future.
Yeah, I think you're right, Troy. There's so much to unpack, and the emotions and the human side of this is of the utmost importance. And then we can go through, and I'm sure there'll be hearings and meetings and deliberations and finger pointing. We were talking about this a little before the show started. You know, the death toll as we're streaming on this Wednesday night is over 100. The missing made a jump yesterday to over 150 people missing and counting. And I was once again having flashbacks to Helene here in the Carolinas.
Yeah.
Death toll kept going up. The amount of people who were missing kept going up. And, you know, the best case scenario that I think all of us here in the Carolinas who still have, you know, wounded hearts from what we saw, and now we're watching it play out with you all, I can only hope that at least the number of missing is wrong. And of course, I hope that the number of fatalities is wrong too, but that one seems a little bit more verified than the pure number of missing, because we know after Helene, the number of missing dramatically went down after they went back through the list and they recapped where people were. And so I guess I'm hoping and praying that is what happens for you all too.
And I've talked to so many people the last couple of days, guys, that are up in your neck of the woods that have told me what it was like there. And I know people in Asheville, and I know people, and I don't know. I think when y'all's event happened up there, I don't think these events don't hit home until they hit home sometimes. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of the way it was. And we began to realize in the last, over the weekend how bad this was, because we had that event. And then here in Austin, we had the flash flood event Saturday night, 15 miles that way. And I sat here with rescue groups trying to tell them that cell was sitting there basically spinning and dropping excessive rainfall amounts and going nowhere. And that's what resulted in our 7 fatalities here in Travis County, including a fire chief of a volunteer fire department, which I know of pretty closely. So it's hard, but at the same time, you would hope that we learn some things.
A lot of heroes who, some of which unfortunately lost their own lives trying to save other lives. And we'll learn more about their names and hopefully their pictures and their loved ones as this continues to unfold. I wanted to just show on the screen again, because Troy, you mentioned it, and this is just the radar loop from the early morning of Friday, July 4th. And folks, if you're listening to our Carolina Weather Group audio podcast, we are looping 5 or 6 hours worth of radar here. This is not what you typically see when you just go to your radar app and you hit play and maybe you're looking at the past 20 minutes. That's almost what it looks like in terms of motion of these storms. But over the course of 5 hours, this is practically no motion. And Troy, as you mentioned, we can see all of those green polygons for the flash flood warnings that were issued. I also want to go, and I have some photos that the officials in Texas have put out. And Troy, one of the things I wanted to ask you about, and I'm going to just say that I'm naive about this, and I have not visited this lovely part of the country, which I do hope to at some point come to. But I understand it's called hill country. And I feel like in some of these pictures, I can start to get a sense of how this river cuts through these hills. And you can see it here in some of these landscapes, how you kind of have peaks and valleys, if you will. Can you just, for folks like myself who've never been there, describe this terrain to us?
Well, that's what, makes up. And of course, I'm a Texas Aggie, so hill country means there are plenty of hills. That, first of all, is part of the thing. But the other two things are not as apparent I'm sure that other people on the panel realize this, but what you don't know is that below this soil that you're seeing in most cases here, there is first of all very little soil. Below that are layers of limestone in a lot of cases, and it's only an inch or two, if even that much, down. And so we call it flash flood alley because of the hills, because of the subsoil limestone layers. If rain hits that at rain rates of 4 to 7 inches an hour, which was in the original flash flood watch, there's nothing good about that anyway. And 4 to 7 was the low end from the original forecast. Sure. But then there's another issue too, which is huge, and it comes more into geography and growth, and that is the urbanization, particularly the eastern part of flash flood alley, particularly along the I-35, Interstate 35 corridor between Austin and San Antonio. And I will tell you that, having been in Kerrville a few times, that even Kerrville's growing. There's not one day that Kerrville doesn't have a new parking lot or something else where we're replacing what little dirt. At least it can run off a little, it can soak in a little bit with concrete and asphalt. And this urbanization factor, in combination with the subsoil limestone layers and the hilly nature of the Texas Hill Country. I'm going to throw another thing in here as well, and I'm hoping those people on the panel will understand this, but combine that with the fact that most people do not, and I'm talking about people in I think people in the Carolinas may understand it more because of last year, and the people in the Hill Country understand it more because of this week. They do not understand the power of moving water. They do not get it. We swim in water, we bathe in water, we shower in water, and people do not understand what happens when you start moving that water along at 10, 15, 20 miles an hour. And if it's a foot deep, it knocks us off our feet. And believe me, I got some weight. It would take it to do that. But I'm telling you, it will. A 20-foot wall of water. And then I go back to thinking about 6, 7, 8-year-old children that are in these camps that along that river. And you cannot begin, it gets you off on the sadness side, which I think we have to experience to some degree. Yeah. And we have to understand that. But I hope that with the cost that we've paid in this event, that we come up with some answers.
I'll tell you, I think my brain is going into, a self-block mode every time I try to access those feelings, because it's too sad, it's too deep, and at some point it will come up. Scotty Powell's in Myrtle Beach, and I know Troy, he has a question.
Sure.
Yeah. Troy, I'm on the broadcast side, so we've obviously been talking about this, but and I have friends that live in Texas, Waco. We go to Austin every time I visit my friends, so I'm kind of familiar with Hill Country, but not this particular town. So 4th of July weekend, can you kind of describe what this town is like during that time of the year? I mean, I know you were talking about there's camps there. Is this a big area where people come and visit maybe on a holiday weekend? Can you kind of describe the background of that area?
Absolutely, Scotty. There are campgrounds all over the place for the general public in the city. Kerrville's a beautiful city, and I got to tell you, beautiful people as well. They're good people. They don't deserve this, but no one would. But at the same time, people come here for that. The big thing that has me worried, and I have some concerns about this, is up and down that river, there are a number of camps. There are church camps. There are just private camps, all sorts of things in there. I at some point want to see some emergency operations plans. That comes from my background and I want to see those, and so forth. And I mean, we would assume, guys and gals, that if you're a parent and you drop off a child at a camp for a week, we are pretty trusting with the fact that we will be able to pick up that child alive a week later. And I think this is one of the primary shocks that we're seeing with this, is that in many cases we're not this week and last week. So it's just it is a big town as far as that's concerned. This whole area is big and outdoors. Scotty, one thing that I would mention as I wrap up and throw back to you is that 2 nights ago I was doing a live shot with with News Nation, and we had a live shot from one of the reporters in Kerrville, and it was at sunset, and he was standing by the river, and the sunset was in the background, and I looked at that, and I kind of teared up, and I looked at it, said, that's what we know Kerrville for.
Mm-hmm.
That amount of background, and then he pulled out, and there are the piles of debris. Yeah. That's truly what we know that city for. People were expecting to have a good weekend. There were parents that were probably coming to pick up their kids following the weekend. There were a lot of people there in RVs, and they were there to enjoy it. And one other thing too that we need to look at very closely is the majority of these people in this event, like we all know, everyone on this panel knows this. Most of our flash flood deaths occur at night. And the majority of them will be at night in this case, because we lose a certain amount of situational awareness. It doesn't mean that we make worse decisions at night. Sometimes we do, but at the same time, it's just harder you can't see a 20-foot wall of water. You don't get a full feel for what's coming down. And these crests, like you're seeing in the hydrographs here that are along the Lana River. This is up near Mason. This is a different river, but folks, look at this. Are you at 12 a.m. on the 4th, or about 2 a.m. actually, it was like 2 or 3 a.m. You ready for that 20-foot? You ready for that 20-foot rise? And we're just. I guess we're lucky in some of these other river basins we didn't lose more people.
There's some video out on social media that kind of is a time lapse that shows this wall of water just coming through, and it just will take your breath away just watching it. And experiencing that in the middle of the night is just just unfathomed. But I'll echo what Troy said, and for what you were saying, James, our former panelist Evan Fisher, Chris, and I, when we went storm chasing, we were down in Texas Hill Country for 2 days, and that is some of the most beautiful country that you will ever see. If you don't think Texas has mountains and hills, they sure do. It is a very beautiful part of the world, and it's devastating to see what's happened there.
Yep.
I will show the sensor gauge we also have from Hunt here. You can see similar rise right there in those overnight hours on a federal holiday, nonetheless.
Yep, absolutely.
Which all feels like a contributing factor. And, I think we are extensively grateful, Troy, as you mentioned, to everyone who is working at the National Weather Service, emergency officials. These are folks who don't get holidays.
Yep.
Right. And they were at work at their post when this happened. Dr. Christine Dahl is the VP of Science with Climate Central. And I should say that I was actually just showing those pictures from Climate Central's Twitter account, X account. But Dr. Dahl, let me bring you into this conversation, because while there's still a lot we don't know and haven't unpacked exactly on how this event happened, we know a little something, and this is pretty similar to us here in the Carolinas, where we went from having a tropical system that came inland, right? And we know that Climate Central has put out posts such as this one, which shows, and this is a NOAA graphic that you guys have retweeted here, right? Flash flooding likely overnight with significant impacts possible. And it goes on to say that these are essentially the remnants of Barry. So Dr. Dahl, can you help us understand some of the science that played out here in terms of where all of this moisture came from?
Yeah, for sure. In both Chantal and in the Central Texas event that was, related to the remnants of Barry, you had these systems that were evolving over really warm ocean waters. I think in the case of Chantal, as the system was strengthening, it was passing over waters that were between 0.5 and 1 degree Celsius warmer than average. And so that means that these systems are able to pick up more moisture. And the meteorologists on this call will be much better than I will at explaining how these systems evolved. But one of the trends we're seeing with climate change is that we're getting more of this tropical system rainfall being carried farther inland because the storms have more energy because of climate change. And so both the rainfall totals that we're seeing here are kind of in line with what we would expect with a warmer world. and in line with the fact that these systems passed over these unusually warm waters.
Yeah, you guys have a graphic here that is, I think, a great basic weather explainer, right? That warmer air holds more moisture. So, um, what do you think is kind of the lasting impact when we think about how far Helene made it inland, or how far Chantal made it inland, or how far these remnants of Barry made it inland? Um, what can we observe from those, do you think, and apply it to our future forecasts?
Yeah, I think that, when we think about the return period of a storm, or like how often a storm of a given magnitude would happen, would it be every year, every 100 years? We're basing that on what we've observed in the past. And as our climate is changing, that's changing, and that past is really no longer a good predictor of the future. It's the same thing when we look at the flood zones that FEMA has designated as, say, a 100-year flood zone or a 500-year flood zone. Consistently with these storms, most recently with Helene last year, with hurricanes going back years and years, we're seeing a lot of the flooding happening outside of those zones. And some of that is reflecting changing nature of storms. Some of that is reflecting the fact that in many parts of the country, these flood maps are outdated to begin with. But I think if we're trying to learn some lessons about what we can predict for future storms, I think recognizing that the storms we have now and the storms we're going to have in the future are going to dump more rain. They're going to dump rain further inland. They're going to dump rain in places that have not experienced this magnitude of storm before. And there are things that we can do to prepare, right? And to protect the people that we love and care about in this changed environment.
And Christina, I mean, in addition, we're going to see areas where urbanization's not going away. These cities are going to continue to grow no matter where you are in the United States. We see that growth, and this is going to be another issue as well. And we better recognize that. I appreciate your comments.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not just storms changing. It's that more and more people are in harm's way, right? We're building in some places where there's a lot of risk. And there are probably ways that we can be building in those places and not incurring the same level of risk. So that gets to, what can communities do to prepare, to protect themselves, to build resilience to these kinds of events.
Troy, I think I heard you talking on WeatherBrains this week about buybacks, and it's something we've seen here in Charlotte, North Carolina. We've seen it in other communities as well, too. The municipalities come in and say, the floodplain is here now. Yeah. We are removing these developments and we're turning it back over to nature. Is that something you guys are doing in Texas?
I don't think I addressed it that much on WeatherBrains, but it is something that has been done in Austin, and wisely so. I think especially in the southeast parts of Austin in our Onion Creek watershed, which is a really flashy watershed. It's on the south side into northern areas of Hayes County into southern Travis County. Out near, if you've been to Austin Airport before, you've flown through Austin Airport, the Austin Airport is sitting right on the north slope, if you will, of the Onion Creek watershed. So we're seeing that in some areas, and people, you get to this. What are we also talking about? I hadn't even thought about what kind of insurance losses that we're going to see from this. And we wonder what's next, because every one of our insurance rates, no matter where you are in this country, continue to go up. Mm-hmm. And we're going to see, I can't even imagine insurance losses. I've seen some estimates, but I don't want to think about it. It gives me a headache. Bottom line, these are all issues that we're going to have to live with as we go into the future. One thing I've been saying all along, if we're supposedly a civilized society, and I have my doubts on that sometimes, but in 2025, but at the same time, if we're a civilized society, this cannot be allowed to happen. We're better than this. We're smarter people than this.
I think doubt is what makes us human at times, Troy. I'm going to put on the screen again some of the Climate Central graphics for the benefit of our audio podcast listeners who maybe didn't get a chance to see them, and we had them on the screen. But you were just talking about potential current and future losses. So according to Climate Central here in North Carolina, where we'll talk about some of our more recent flooding events in just a moment, 674 million today. That's up 34% by the year 2050. And then you guys also put out some numbers for Texas, and those numbers coming on your screen right now. 1.5 billion today, up 47% by 2050.
Yeah,
it's a competition. I don't think anybody really wants to win, but there's obviously a value that lives have in that, there's no monetary value, right? Any loss of life is too many loss of lives. But when you start thinking about the infrastructure, when you start thinking about societies and the structures that come with them, there is a magnitude of, we see it with Noah and in years past, not anymore, getting the $1 billion disaster breakdowns because there is a hit to the economy, right? There's a reason that Noah is in the Department of Commerce, Troy.
Yeah. And, something else, too, I will mention. I don't know if y'all heard the news or not. It doesn't surprise me. I was on the phone with a correspondent with CNN earlier today, a friend, actually a former person in my class many years ago at UT, and we were talking about this. Unfortunate for what it is. I told this friend, I said, Kerrville will have a flood warning system before in the next 3 or 4 months. Well, just 10 minutes after I talked to him, I don't know if you've seen it, Texas governor announced this afternoon special session of the Texas legislature will go into session ASAP, and they will talk about flood warning systems in the state of Texas. I was shocked a little bit originally. I will tell you, I was angry a little bit originally when some state officials and local officials called out the Weather Service in Austin, San Antonio. Sure. I did not let that stand. I will not let that stand. And then I was kind of surprised to hear, well, we couldn't afford an alarm system or a siren system along the river. And I asked some questions. I said, well, does 100 deaths buy you a siren system? What's the cost? Is it 150? And I had some people kind of look at me sideways, and I said, I'm asking you. I want to know what is the cost, and hopefully we're going to see some changes in Texas in regard, especially to camps and things like that, about how emergency action plans. And I'm hoping that we will see in Kerrville, we deserve, and I know we will see a flood warning system soon.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that it comes after this event. We can only hope it becomes before the next event. We've heard a lot about WEAs, the wireless emergency alerts, as you mentioned, Troy, those going off with the considerable tier flash flood warnings.
Have you heard, James, about the special situation that we have down here that no one knew about? Just to let y'all know, again, about 10 years ago, the National Weather Service, the WCM, Paul Ura, who is a good friend who's recently retired, as you know, and Paul sat down with emergency managers and partners more than 10 years ago, and because of WEA not being sent to basic flash flood warnings, only to considerable and catastrophic and emergencies, it was decided more than 10 years ago that the National Weather Service office in San Antonio and Austin, San Antonio, does not issue base flash flood warnings. I don't know if you're aware of that, but they never have. And so if there's any question about the WEAs, there should be none.
Troy, it's interesting because Charleston has a similar policy.
Good. I'm glad to see it. I, to be honest with you guys, I'm a little shocked when you consider flash flood warnings and what kills the most people. I'm surprised that when WEA was developed, and by the way, make sure everyone understands, WEA is not a National Weather Service product. It is developed by FEMA and with the FCC and other agencies to assist in getting that word out. Is it perfect? No. It goes to cell towers. But I was kind of surprised initially at base flash flood warnings, and that's the reason that Paul and our group here in South Central Texas asked, emergency managers asked, we don't want a flash flood warning going out without a WEA. Well, we're not going to get it with WEA's policies, so we'll just get rid of base flash flood warnings for Austin, San Antonio. I contend that was a good decision years ago.
A lot of social science to unpack, and we heard your WEA go off just as you joined tonight for a blue alert in Texas, which is not weather related, and a whole other rabbit hole. Frank has put in our chat that he has a quick comment. Frank, should I come to you before I ask my next question to Dr. Dahl?
Yeah, just real quick. Jared mentioned that Charleston has a similar policy on flash flood warnings, but their policy's changing slightly. They just did a webinar about that this morning, actually.
Okay. Breaking news from this morning.
Flash flood warnings, but base flash flood warnings and fewer flash flood advisories will be happening soon.
Oh, wow.
They're going to be changing that policy slightly.
But you know something that's interesting about that, Frank, and we've talked about this on WeatherBrains, and this is a whole nother, here I go, I'll swat a nest of hornets here and then I'll leave. But we do have a problem somewhat, Frank, in this country with too many warnings. I'm worried about warning fatigue in this country and how much that plays. Let me tell you a story, guys, so you know. You see this thing here in Austin on Saturday, it was going off constantly. Every time I'd try to do something, all of a sudden I'd get a WEA for a flash flood emergency. And I had friends that called and they said, we're tired of this. We're going to turn it off. And I'm sitting there going, don't do this. Please don't do this. And what I'm worried is if we have too many warnings, that people get warning fatigue. And this is one reason that I'm impressed by some work that's been done by Kevin Laws and the people at the weather office in Birmingham, Alabama. Kevin's a good friend. And they have looked at an office at the number of warnings they issue and trying to just get a handle on making sure that those warnings, they're trying to decrease their false alarm ratio, basically, through that. So I applaud that. We've got to be concerned with that as well, I think, Frank, to some degree.
Yeah, I agree with you. And that's actually a question that came up in the webinar this morning. It's like, are we going to come up with warning fatigue or increase the level of warning fatigue and have people start tuning out? And that is a concern that we all have here. And it's something that we do have to think about, that if we're issuing flash flood warnings every time there's a thunderstorm, people are going to start to tune those out. So we do have to be careful with how we handle that.
It's like anything else. You know, your social media app sending you too many notifications, you mute it.
Yep.
You get too much in your phone. A few moments ago on the show, I was talking about the Climate Central numbers for current and future flood losses, and it occurred to me I should ask Dr. Dahl, who works for Climate Central and put these numbers together, if I represented them correctly or if you had some points to add on to these.
Yeah, I mean, as I was looking at those, I was reflecting on something that Troy had said a little bit earlier in the show, which is that, I'm a parent, right? And he said something like, you have these parents dropping their kids off for a week of camp and expecting that they're going to pick them up. And I remember the first time I dropped my son off at just even day camp, right? Sure. I knew they were going to be getting on a bus and going on some adventures, and the trust that you have to have that they're going to be safe. And, how many, there's just like a number like $2 billion of damage. It just is incomparable to the loss of a single child, right? And so as we think about, like Troy said something like, I doubt sometimes that we're a civilized society, and we do incredible division in the US right now. But I do think that the desire to make sure that we are keeping our children safe is a common value that we can be uniting around as we think about. And it doesn't have to be now to think about what we could have done differently, but in the months and in the years ahead, as we recover, thinking about what we can be doing better by our kids is I think, something that could unite us and help us chart a better path forward.
One thing, Christina, and others here, and I have to kind of plug this. And one thing that I have been supportive of is something that our colleague Mike Smith has pointed out up in Kansas about a disaster review committee, a disaster review board, and the formation. I was very happy today with my friend Dr. Neil Jacobs' confirmation hearing in NOAA today. I was glad to hear what he had to say, and I'm glad he endorsed that idea as well. And by the way, I want people in the Weather Service that are my friends. I love the Weather Service. I think it's a great agency, and you're working under very difficult circumstances at the current time. This is nothing against the Weather Service. I want something like the NTSB. I admire that organization. If we kill 50 people in an airplane crash, what's any different from losing 200 people in a flood? I mean, it's the same sort of thing. We deserve answers. And Weather Service in the past had done service assessments. And I might point out, very good. I've got a whole folder of them. I wouldn't lose them for anything. I love the climatology and looking back at them. But let's get an external review of what happened. And that way we get an idea what went right. By the way, we talk about what goes wrong, but I want to know what went right. And we'll see what went wrong. And I would hope, and this is my hope, that like the NTSB, that they'll keep a web page, that board will, and they'll have a checklist, a whole page that says these are our recommendations. And this is what they do for the FAA. They have it on there. They say recommendation accepted or not. And it's basically a report card that's online. And that's what I foresee out of this review committee. I really believe this is important. We have to, as a weather enterprise in this country, step forward and get everyone together and have a civilized discussion about this, and maybe meet in the middle somewhere and come up with some ideas.
Even a winning football team should meet and find out how they're going to play better next year.
Yep.
Jordan, we're going to get to you in just a second, I promise, because we want to look at some of the maps you put together for the event in Texas and the event we saw here in the Carolinas this week. Troy, let me ask you one more question about Texas, even though I have a million of them. You mentioned the mental health aspect for the families, for the first responders, for the meteorologists at the National Weather Service. Can you speak to us at all about your friends, your family, your neighbors, your colleagues' life down there right now? And frankly, if there's anything we can do to help.
I think prayer. I just pray for the families right now. And I'm just telling you that I've seen, we're going to have to, the National Weather Service, by the way, the government has a great support system for their employees. It's kind of tucked away a little bit, but they have it available. And I'm told that that's already being offered, and that's great. We're going to have first responders. You know, first responders we're in a way in Texas, we're a tough bunch, but I've seen people that are very tough, friends of mine in the last week, that you saw some of the pictures of some of our troopers from the Texas State Troopers that just look like they're sort of at the end of their that's all they could take for the day. And those pictures sadden me, because those people are seeing things. But I know that there's a good support system there in the state of Texas. And we have so many people that are willing to volunteer. We've had, as far as just health concerns and so forth, there are a lot of people that are out supporting these people, and we thank those people. They're doing things that we would never imagine, and working with people and trying to get them past this to some degree. Again, I worked in law enforcement a little bit in the past, the sheriff's office, and I've seen things before myself, and I just have to kind of compartmentalize things and kind of move down the road and try to understand it. And what's really interesting about all of us here is that we have a pretty good group of scientists here, and I think we work toward the fact that we just want answers. We're pretty intelligent thinking people. We want to work toward answers with all this. So give me to a point where you can tell me some answers, and we can get better at what we're doing. And I think, and I'll be honest with you, groups like this, Carolina Weather Group and WeatherBrains, the best therapeutic thing that probably happened to me in the last week happened Monday night at 7:00 with James Spann, and also with y'all tonight, because I think talking about it and sharing the stories and maybe showing a little human emotion, I think is important. I know it is for me. I wear my heart on my shoulders, and it's been good for me to be able to be here with you tonight and to be able to share some of the stories of some of the people that I love here in South Central Texas that I work with, and things like that have done an amazing job in the Weather Service and our first responders as well across the state of Texas, and they're amazing.
Troy, we appreciate you sharing some of your heart with us. we are here with you guys, and your comments tonight have been really helpful in helping us understand beyond what we're seeing in headlines.
Yeah.
Please keep us updated if there's anything we can do from here. We know the nation showed up after Helene, and we stand with you guys. As we come up on the 45-minute mark, I thank Troy for his time, and Dr. Dahl from Climate Central. I don't know if you have anything else you want to add in before I know we are going to get to some localized weather that's happening here in the Carolinas tonight, but I wanted to give you another opportunity to talk a little bit about the work at Climate Central too.
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much for having me. And it's just been a really fascinating conversation. Yeah, and I would just encourage folks, if you're curious about the climate connections with extreme rain, flash flooding, Climate Central's got a great library of resources and graphics, really easy to digest explainers on all kinds of climate related topics and weather extremes. So do check out our website, climatecentral.org. Find graphics like this one for wherever you are in the US. So yeah, thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. We hope you come back soon. And before I let you go, let me ask you about this graphic and what we saw here in the Carolinas this week with Chantal. Is there anything, Dr. Dahl, that stood out to you with regards to that quote unquote just a tropical storm that brought impacts to us here? Yeah,
well, I was looking at the rainfall totals in North Carolina for Chantal and looking at NOAA's Atlas 14 product, which reports sort of the return periods of heavy precipitation, how often you can expect that. And it was really, in some places in North Carolina, just off the charts. More rare than a 1 in 1,000 year event, according to our data. So, but as you could see from that previous graphic showing the increase in precipitation intensity exactly for the Raleigh-Durham area, that's a really clear trend from the 1970s to today, a 20% increase in rainfall intensity. And that's something that we're seeing, in most parts of the continental US, seeing that kind of increase. So that's expected to continue, right? Unfortunately, these heavy rains are going to be with us as long as we're warming the planet.
Yeah, absolutely. And we appreciate that perspective. As always, all our guests are welcome to stick around as we continue on, but I want to be respectful of your time too as it draws later into the evening. And what a wonderful segue that you've set up here as we bring Jordan McLeod into the conversation, because Jordan, you've taken a look at some of those Atlas data. You've taken a look at some of the rainfall data, and what we saw here in the Carolinas and what we saw in Texas were yet again another 1,000-year flood event. Can you walk us through, Jordan, what you observed in that data?
Absolutely. Thanks, James, and everybody for having me on. This has been a really great discussion. So what I did is, I just wanted to try to put these events into some kind of perspective. I like to do that ever since I worked at the Southeast Regional Climate Center. One of my goals was to try to put weather and climate events into some sort of historical perspective. And so that's kind of my main mission here. And what I did here, for the image that you see on the screen there is basically take the National Weather Service's MPE gridded precipitation product, which is a blend of radar and ground-based observations. It's one of the best precipitation observation data sets that we have, at least on a grid. And for each of those pixels, which are approximately 4 by 4 kilometers, basically I compared every pixel against NOAA's Atlas 14 1,000-year average recurrence interval. And it may be a little bit hard to see, but if you look closely there between Burlington and Durham, there's some white outline pixels in some of the heaviest precipitation that occurred. Yeah, thanks, James. That's perfect.
I try.
Yeah. So basically, you can see that those pixels met or exceeded their 1,000-year average recurrence interval. And what that basically means for the general public is that, for that particular pixel, there was a 0.1% chance of that rainfall amount being observed in any given year. I think that kind of puts it maybe a little more into perspective than just saying it was a 1 in 1,000 year rain event. Sometimes folks, may not understand that in its full context. But when you say there was just a 0.1% chance of it happening this year, that kind of gives it some additional clues. And, again, I want to emphasize a couple of things about these maps. And the first of which is this is the 1 day precipitation for that event. If we were to look at, say, 6 hours, the greatest 6 hourly time period, we would get maybe a slightly different perspective here. Basically, we might see that pixels around Chapel Hill and Durham might have eclipsed their 1,000-year recurrence interval. So it all depends on which time period you're looking at. I just chose to show the 1 day perspective there. And another thing I want to emphasize is that these NOAA Atlas 14 products assume a stationary climate. Basically, we know that with climate change in the background, those values should be and are changing with time, which is one great reason I want to plug a new product. NOAA Atlas 15 is actually in development right now and will be released, I believe, sometime next year, if I read the documentation correctly. So that is a new product that is updated from Atlas 14 that hopefully will take into account some of those changing climate factors.
Yeah, the ever-changing climate factors. We have some pictures on the screen right now from Joseph Navin, just to kind of show, what the ground truth was to what some of this data was showing in terms of river flooding and creek flooding and street flooding. We know the interstate was closed. We know that the railroad here in North Carolina was washed out between Greensboro and Durham. Images that on a micro scale are not too dissimilar from places we saw in Helene. When I think about water systems being overrun, thinking about railroads and roads being washed out. And here's a picture on the screen right now from Xavier Hunter of that railroad. That's the Norfolk Southern line and the Amtrak passenger line there that were washed out. And I know frantically trying to get that back online. Mebane has 2 days worth of water left after critical infrastructure failure there has disrupted their water supply. And so we have this microcosm of an event, and I referenced it earlier as quote unquote just a tropical storm, because I think that socially a lot of people go, well, it's just a tropical storm. It's not even a hurricane. Well, spoiler alert, when Helene got here, it was also just a tropical storm, a really strong one. But what do these names even mean anymore if this is what we see when we're at the lower end of the scale? Jordan, I want to switch now the graphic from North Carolina to Texas, because you did the similar analysis with Texas, and I'm wondering what your analysis showed there.
Yeah, excellent. I'm glad you brought this up because I think it ties in nicely to a lot of things that have been said tonight by Troy and Christina. Basically, I did the same type of analysis here. Now, you'll notice couple of things to point out here about this. This is a 3-day, before we were looking at a 1 day. This is the 3-day accumulated precipitation using that same MPE product. And now I'm looking just at 100-year average recurrence intervals. I ran this analysis first looking at 1,000-year, thinking I might see quite a few pixels. It turns out there weren't as many, at least at the 3-day scale. Now, if you go down to maybe 6 hours or 1 day, you might start to see more. But I want to emphasize a couple of interesting things here. It's interesting that the devastating flooding that occurred near Kerrville, just to the west there, actually did not even reach its 100-year recurrence interval, at least at this 3-day stage. What this tells me is that basically it was not necessarily the cumulative effect, it was more the intensity at the, at a sort of shorter temporal scale, the hourly to maybe daily at the most scale, that this rain was just coming down so quickly in such a short amount of time, and at a very in an area that simply could not hold this much water in the basin, that basically it was more about the intensity than it was sort of the total duration of the event. But nonetheless, we do see in other areas northwest of Austin in the Burnett area and also west of Mason that a lot of pixels in those areas did eclipse the 100-year return event. So, there's, I guess the short story here is that, you can slice and dice this data in a lot of different ways to show different things. But, the point here is just to hammer home the point that these were very unusual events at the tails of the distribution. No matter how you want to slice and dice it, these were extreme events in every sense of the word.
Jordan, these graphics are amazing. Thank you for what you put together, because keep in mind the Kerrville event occurred Thursday night, Friday morning. And then our other events unfolded primarily Saturday into early Sunday or Saturday night. And again, that event just northwest of Austin, which we had, I think we're up to 10 or 12, maybe 13 fatalities in that area because it's the 3-county area. I didn't, and out toward Mason, that area, that's more of a rural area. That is an area where I don't think you see quite as many campers and that sort of thing where they're going. It's still part of the Texas Hill Country. But thank you, Jordan, for these graphics.
Oh, you're welcome, Troy. I appreciate the comments.
And I feel like a broken record. I feel like I just keep bringing this up. There are so many comparisons, it feels like, back to Helene, because, Jordan, you're putting out a 3-day map here, and what we saw with Helene was a predecessor rain event as well too. To see that kind of repeat itself is scarring in a way. It's kind of reopening a wound. And Troy will back me up here if I'm recalling the statistic correctly, but I was just trying to pull up NOAA's final report on Helene, because there was also a callback there that while Helene to date has more total fatalities, there were 78 fatalities from Helene in North Carolina that were related to flooding. There were more in other categories, such as tornadoes and storm surge, when you look at the whole storm as a whole. But just in North Carolina, there were 78 deaths from Helene from flooding. Texas has unfortunately surpassed that.
Yes,
that's right.
Yep.
Yeah, I actually, James, just to piggyback off that real quick, I tweeted and posted that on Facebook. I found that amazing that, this sort of unnamed system. I mean, yes, it was associated with the remnants of Barry, but nevertheless, really this unnamed system produced more flood fatalities than both Helene or Hurricane Harvey, for that matter.
Yep.
Which we know, we all remember Hurricane Harvey back in 2017 and what it did to the Houston area and surrounding areas. But it goes to show that you don't need a named system to produce extreme, exceptional impacts. And I think this is a poster child example of that.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said that better myself. This one did get a name. I want to talk about Chantal, who came ashore in the Carolinas over the course of the past week. And Scotty Powell, we know it came ashore near Myrtle Beach. Our Carolina Weather Group storm chaser Dan Whitaker was streaming live there on our Carolina Weather Group YouTube channel as the sun came up following that early morning landfall. And of course, we've been talking a lot about the flooding that the storm brought to North Carolina, but it impacted South Carolina first, Scotty.
Yeah, it definitely did. And Chantal made landfall about 20 miles south of the Myrtle Beach metro area in a little spot called Lynchfield Beach. It's between Pawleys Island and Merle's Inlet, if you're familiar with the South Carolina, the Grand Strand coast. And I'll tell you all, if that storm had been out over water, Jared, you probably could back me up. I know you didn't see much there in Charleston, but that storm was out over the water maybe another 12 hours, we'd probably be talking about Hurricane Chantal, because it really pulsed up right before it was about to make landfall. I think at landfall, winds were about 60 miles per hour. So, getting to the verge of a Cat 1 hurricane. But here in the Grand Strand, We definitely had a lot of wind. In fact, more wind than that what we were forecasting. We had gusts here on the Grand Strand of 60, 65 miles per hour. So definitely saw some wind. Thankfully, not a lot of damage from that wind. We did see some heavy rain around here along the immediate coast, around 2 to 4 inches of rain. But once you got into inland Horry County and then got up into the Lumberton area and then up into Southern Pines, we saw a good 6 to 8 inches of rain, and really it just exploded after it got out of Southern Pines into Durham and Chapel Hill. So we definitely saw a lot of rainfall, but we told folks here this is just kind of an appetizer before the big season gets going. I believe this is Jared, back me up. I think it's the third named storm we've had affect the South Carolina coast in the last 4 years. Frank, you would probably know as well. I'm trying to think of the stat there, but we're starting to get these early season storms move into South Carolina between Charleston, Myrtle Beach area, Wilmington. So it was really just kind of one of those things of like, hey, everyone, reminder, it's hurricane season. As we get into the months of August and September, October, our attention really turns to the tropics and what's going on there. So we had a weak tornado in Wilmington, actually hit right there at the airport on EF0 around, I think it's around 4:30 in the morning. As your typical landfalling tropical system here is thankfully, again, on the lighter side of things, and really no damage suffered. But just kind of that wake up call of, hey, it's that time of the year. It's time to wake up and make sure you have those hurricane preparations. Make sure you have that hurricane kit ready to go, because, now between now and the end of October, really for us, is that time that we have to monitor each and every storm out in the Atlantic and the Gulf.
Well, then this storm must have had something for airports, because it also touched down at the Raleigh Executive Airport. 5 tornadoes in total, which I think are playing second fiddle to all of the water damage that it left behind. It did unfortunately cause some fatalities, I believe 6 in total at last count. 4 in a vehicle, 2 out in a canoe on Jordan Lake on Sunday evening. And as we mentioned earlier in the show, still ongoing impacts for those along the I-85, I-40 corridor where some of this heaviest rain fell. We know that the Cape Fear River is high tonight as the Chantal water makes its way out to the Atlantic. And we know that we have storms on radar tonight, which are back over this very same region. So let's talk a little bit about some of the things that are happening. Scotty?
Yeah, I was going to say also the Lumber River in Lumberton forecasted now to go into moderate flood stage. So that's kind of an update. It was supposed to be in minor, but now with the more rain falling in North Carolina, expecting the Lumberton River to now go to moderate stage. And if you remember the Lumber River, Hurricane Matthew should come to mind. Yep. And just that's kind of the river that caused all the flooding, and the sandhills of North Carolina that kind of flowed into the PD of South Carolina. So again, not expecting Matthew type flooding, but again, moderate stage river flooding is something that will affect people's homes there in the Lumberton area, and then flows into places like Conway, into Loris, Lungs, and Horry County, and then eventually down into Bucksport, which is south of Myrtle Beach, before it flows out into the Atlantic.
Let's talk a little bit about what's happening live right now on this Wednesday night, and we'll go ahead and we'll pop radar up on the screen, because you can see all of the rain that is falling across North Carolina tonight. You can see we have some flash flood warnings on the screen right now. I'm going to turn off some of the mesoscale discussions so we can really zero in a little bit more on where those flash flood warnings are. But all in all, from corner to corner, I mean, we're talking about 150 miles, and some of those hardest hit areas that do not need any more rain right on in here. It is raining yet again. And Scotty, I understand you were monitoring some of the discussion tonight from the National Weather Service in Raleigh. What's going on there?
Yes. So right now in High Point, there's numerous swift water rescues ongoing in the city from the flooding there. Emergency management reporting at least 4 to 5 that are out there. Also seeing reports of flooding in Chapel Hill and Durham. I know Chapel Hill is kind of Jordan's old stomping grounds there. There's a lot of streets that are closed in the downtown Chapel Hill area. If you're not familiar with that, that's University of North Carolina campus. So flooding there. And then something that we were just talking about, Troy, with the WEA alerts, the forecast office there in Raleigh reissued a flash flood warning till 2 a.m. and they were checking with all broadcast media emergency managers to make sure those WEA alerts, those extensions were pushed out. And so far, all the responses I've seen, everyone has got them. So I guess playing back to what you all experienced, last week, it's always better to be safe and sorry, to make sure that everyone that can respond to make sure that those WEA alerts are going out.
Yep.
We know after Helene, those wireless emergency alerts were going off too. And I know even in Mecklenburg County, where we were right on the edge of some of the Helene impacts, those wireless emergency alerts for those considerable and destructive flash flood warnings, they go off each and every time, which, might seem annoying if you're not actively experiencing the flooding, but flooding moves. It flows. And so you are receiving that warning for a reason. So no matter whether you got it once, twice, 6, 8 times, there is a reason that you are getting it.
Yeah. And, let's say, not everyone always checks their phone when an alert goes off. So it's always good to kind of push those out. And just, as we say in TV, we have some of the most, we kind of talk about the same thing in each hit, but that's because we're touching a different audience every time. And when these notifications get pushed out, that's the way I see it. Sometimes you push it out to people who may have not seen it the first time. So
we are getting reports that a car is stuck in the water. Reported it was halfway up the height of the car on Old Thomasville Road near English Street, again in High Point, as Scotty mentioned. These training showers and thunderstorms moving across the area. Scotty mentioned the considerable warning that is out. That goes for another 3.5 hours and counting. That is for Davidson, Forsyth, Guilford, and Randolph counties. And I say 3.5 hours and counting because we have seen that these will be extended if needed be. So even if you're heading to bed, do keep that in mind. I want to zoom into Wake County right now. I want to click on some of these storm reports that are coming in. And man, this is so reminiscent of Sunday. Hillsborough right now, emergency management reporting that there is flooding ongoing at Orange Grove Road and South Churchton Road here in Durham. We have a broadcast media report of flash flooding ongoing in Durham. We also have, and Scotty, you just mentioned it, and I'm showing the visual on the screen now, 4 reports of flash flooding in Durham near UNC. Chapel Hill Police report flooding at MLK and Estates. Jordan, you know the name of that one?
Estes, I think.
Estes, okay. We have flash flooding ongoing right now on Willow Drive. We have flash flooding ongoing on Pritchard Avenue, and we have flash flooding ongoing at Bennett Road and Mount Carmel. And those are just the ones that the National Weather Service has entered into the system, because I'm sure they're going to have more. And I think these 3 just popped up near Oxford too.
Yeah, and it's honestly one of those nights where if you don't have to be outside, don't go outside. Yeah. Don't jeopardize you and Troy, I'm sure, will back me up on this, working with emergency management. Not only are you jeopardizing your life, but you're jeopardizing the lives who are going to potentially come out and save you. So it just does everyone the best.
And Scotty, we're at night, and here we are again. Here we are again. This is your situational awareness is. If you don't have to be out, folks, please do not go out. If you're on high ground, stay where you are.
Speaking of high ground, the Granville County Sheriff's Office reports at least 2 feet of water in the C.G. Creddle Elementary School in Oxford due to flooding tonight, ongoing right now. Luckily, and I guess this is the upside, Troy, to it being night, there's no one there, hopefully, at the school.
Yeah. Right.
But, that is going to be something that potentially has impacts as they look ahead to the next school year. 2 feet of water is going to do a lot of damage in an elementary school.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And the sad, scary part is we're going to do this all over again tomorrow with that front that's slowed down and almost stalled across the area. We're going to have another round of showers and storms, and it looks to be even more widespread than it is today. So,
Scotty, why don't you start us off there? And then I think Frank had some comments about the forecast out ahead. What can we expect?
Yeah, it just looks like we have Shay, our panelist there, always said the cold fronts come here to die in the summertime, and that's really what happened. With the Remnants or with Chantal, we had a stalled front, low pressure developed on it, and we had something tropical develop. So tomorrow, that slow moving front, just very, very, very slow, continues to move through the area. We have the heat, humidity. We've had heat advisories all week with just so much moisture and humidity in the air combined with the heat. So we've got all the ingredients there for these slow moving thunderstorms. We were watching it today in the office. We had storms going from southwest to northeast, and then they kind of started drifting southwest, and then they would drift to the west. They're just very, very just meandering out there. There's no real steering currents to steer these storms from one place to the other. So you get those storms that kind of bubble up and train over the same area. And as Troy was talking about, you get those high rainfall rates, and you get an hour, 2-3 hour storm, and it's just going to produce a lot of rain over one location, and that's how you get these flash flooding events. And it's been pretty saturated as well, leading up to this event. So just kind of all the signs point together that there could be some flooding in the area. And I think the excessive weather or rain outlook for today was a level 3 out of 4 for a lot of the Carolinas. Yeah.
And it was then specifically in that area that was hardest hit by Chantal. You can see how the Weather Prediction Center took that all the way up to a moderate, as you mentioned, especially in that area because the flood tolerance is so low. The basins are so high. The lakes are so high. The creeks and rivers and streams are so high. And you mentioned, Scotty, that we could have more rain on the way. So even when we look ahead to tomorrow, we're still talking at least a slight risk tier 2. And, if weather has taught us anything over the last week, it is watch and monitor for that to possibly change. Frank, what's on your radar for the rest of the week? Oh, Frank pulled a Scotty.
Man, Frank, this is good. This is becoming the Frank thing now.
It is becoming the Frank thing. Yeah. Doing it all the time.
But it will
now.
forever be called the Scotty, even if Frank starts predominantly.
Scotty used to do it all the time.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're basically doing this all over again tomorrow, including South Carolina. In fact, the setup may be even a little better for South Carolina tomorrow than it was today. We continue to have an even juicier air mass than usual. We're known for our heat and humidity down here in the Carolinas, and the humidity is even higher than usual with some really thick tropical moisture in place. So we're going to have thunderstorms again. You see Scotty has tomorrow's severe weather outlook in place, and once again, level 2 of 5, severe risk. Really, the only threat is for locally damaging winds, just a little more widespread than usual with the typical afternoon storms that we get this time of year. But the storms are going to be more widespread than we typically see this time of year too. So get ready for that and be prepared for those locally damaging winds and also the risk for flooding as well. We did not have a tremendous number of flash flood warnings or severe thunderstorm warnings in South Carolina today. There were more in North Carolina, the risk a little higher up there. But again, tomorrow in South Carolina, we probably do see an even busier day than we saw today, and probably about the same level of activity in North Carolina as we continue to see an upper level trough sitting over us. It's cooler than usual aloft. It's hot and muggy near the surface, so that's an environment where we can get a lot of thunderstorm activity, and the popcorn just keeps going every afternoon, and it looks like we'll see more afternoon thunderstorm activity. Gets a little less widespread by the time we get to Friday and potentially into the weekend, but they'll still be around, and it's still going to be hot and muggy each day.
Yeah, I mean, the summertime is really in full swing here. The humidity levels, the heat index, the storms that are popping off. I almost mentioned this earlier, and I will take the opportunity now. NOAA Weather Radio is your best friend. We always tell you to have multiple ways to receive warnings. That could be the WIAs, that could be NOAA, that could be broadcast, that could even be the Carolina Weather Net. But we don't want any one of those, including us, we don't want any one of those to be the only way you're getting warnings. And I'm bringing this up because while I'm not here to plug any particular retailer this week, there are some sales happening out there. And so if you are wondering how to ready yourself, your family, after these events that we've seen, get a NOAA weather radio for your house, get one for your car, get one for your tent, your RV, whatever it may be, because these things work when nothing else works.
One other thing too, James, that I think is important tonight, and I'll close out and bow out on my end, but I think that your timing with that message is so important. You've got to have 2 or 3 or 4. You've got to have more than 2, 3 or 4 different sources of weather information. And if nothing else, the one thing most of us on this that are a part of this tonight know who Kevin Clazel is. Kevin is a good friend. He used to be at OU, and he's now retired and living not that far from Austin, and is working with the folks up at Baylor. One of Kevin's favorite sayings is, and I think tonight is a good time to mention this, is hope is not a plan. And as we all go forward, we've got to have a plan. And I brought this up with people today in one of my interviews. People say, well, the weather is not that bad most of the time where I am. And I said, I'm not talking about weather. I'm talking about the fire tomorrow morning at 1:35 in your house when you've got 2 children and a spouse in your house or a partner in your house. Have a plan. It's not a good time to work that out at 1:35 when you're trying to get a hold of the fire department to come and fight this fire. And the same thing with weather as well. Don't go into things blindly. Have a plan. And if I don't do anything else tonight, I leave tonight just telling people, have a plan, exercise it, by the way. That's important as well. And at least you'll be ahead of the curve.
Absolutely. Those are great words, Troy.
Yep.
We appreciate your time, your local expertise. Please share our hello and our thanks back to everyone over at WeatherBrains. And we hope to talk with you again soon under much better circumstances.
I appreciate that. And it's an honor to be with you all tonight. And from WeatherBrains to the Carolina Weather Group, thank you. And we'll speak again with sunny skies. I promise.
I look forward to it. Does anyone else on our panel tonight have any other thoughts to close us out with? I do have something to look forward to that I'll put on everyone's radar, and that is a wonderful event that is coming up later this month.
This episode of the Carolina Weather Group is brought to you by Extreme Weatherproof, coming Saturday, July 19th at the Shield Museum of Natural History in Gastonia, North Carolina. Come hang out with the Carolina Weather Group from 10 until 4 p.m. Try your hand at our green screen, buy exclusive merch, or just come say hi to your favorite Carolina Weather Group panelist. We can't wait to see you at Extreme Weatherproof on Saturday, July 19th.
This is a wonderful event, so I hope you guys will come see us in Gastonia. And we will have a very cool announcement to make. So if you are with us at the Shield Museum of Natural History, you will be the first person to see it and experience it before we bring it back to the rest of the world. But we do have a cool announcement coming that Saturday. Troy, our thanks to you, Jordan, Dr. Dahl, and our panels tonight, Frank Strait, Scotty Powell, and Jared Smith. I'm James Brierton in Charlotte. Hug your loved ones. Hold them extra close. And we will stand united on all of this and all of the weather has to bring, because it touches each and every one of us. But for now, we hope you're well, and we will talk to you again next week for another edition of the Carolina Weather Group. Have a good night.